The man who goes farthest is generally the one who is willing to do and dare. The sure-thing boat never gets far from shore. Dale Carnegie. Welcome to Session 5. Our topic in this session and the one that follows is assertive curiosity. And I'm sure you can't wait to find out what that's all about. How can I be so sure? It's because people are naturally curious. We're born with it. Isaac Singer, the Nobel Prize-winning author, once described life as a novel that has good parts and bad parts. But whatever else you might say about it, everybody wants to see what's on the following page. Everybody wants to learn what's going to happen next. Everybody is inherently curious about the world, and we should do everything we can to nurture that inborn human characteristic and keep it alive. This has special relevance in a corporate setting. Curiosity can be of tremendous benefit to any managers who know how to ignite the inborn curiosity of their team. So in the next 2 sessions, we'll explore strategies and tactics for making the best possible use of other people's curiosity. Most importantly, we'll see why the key to doing this lies in keeping your own curiosity alive and well. Let's look at an example of how this works. Michelle is an investor relations executive with a large multinational corporation. Her job is a very interesting one, and it depends heavily on her having a healthy sense of curiosity. Basically, she keeps in touch with people who are large investors in her company and tries to learn if they have any particular needs or concerns. In the real world, this translates into what might be called glorified babysitting. Many, though not all, of the large investors are elderly people for whom loneliness is a real concern. At this point in their lives, they have a lot of money and not much else going on. When Michelle contacts them, they want to talk about their investment, but they also want to feel that she's taking a real interest in their lives. The conversations that result from this may not seem like conventional business discussions, but Michelle quickly learned that talking about someone's grandchildren for half an hour can make a very positive difference when it's time for her company's annual shareholder meeting. So she's learned to be genuinely curious about the people she talks with and about what they have to say. Often this has meant delving into topics that might not have seemed all that interesting at first glance. But it's amazing how fascinating things can become when you start seeing curiosity as an essential element in your career success. When Michelle was tasked with training a new employee to help her with her work, she had a chance to reflect on what curiosity really means as a people skill in a business environment. Like Michelle, you may be a manager who wants to motivate your team to learn as much as possible as quickly as possible. Or you yourself may be a new hire who's curious about your company. You want to put your curiosity into action in ways that will benefit you and your employers. But whether you're a seasoned manager or a new employee, what you're really looking for is assertive curiosity. That's a very unique and somewhat complex frame of mind. It includes no less than 10 separate but closely related elements. By putting them into action, you can instantly maximize the role of curiosity in your people skills repertoire. So let's look at these points one by one. First, you need to realize that assertive curiosity is an emotional as well as an intellectual experience. When you're dealing with another person, this is the difference between really creating a sense of shared discovery and just politely inquiring about one thing or another. If there's one word that describes this special kind of energy, the word is passion. Assertive curiosity is more about passion than about simply gathering facts. It's not only motivating yourself to learn, but teaching yourself to do it in ways that are meaningful, memorable, and effective. It's about caring for what you want to learn, feeling real excitement for it, and conveying that excitement to the people around you. How did Thomas Edison manage to get over 1,000 patents from the U.S. Patent Office? A record that will probably never be broken. The engine that powered all those discoveries was infinite, unlimited curiosity. Edison wasn't a theorist. He was what's called an empirical thinker. He liked to see how things worked in the real world. It didn't really matter whether the real world worked the way he thought it would, because even if one of his experiments came out differently than he expected, he never regarded this as a failure. He never spoke of failed experiments in the conventional scientific jargon. Every experiment was a success because he always found out something new. If it was something other than what he anticipated, so much the better. What's more, Edison was able to transfer this curiosity to all the people who worked with him. That's what made him an assertively curious person. Of course, assertive curiosity is about substance as well as emotion. So the second point involves seeing yourself both as a student and as a purveyor of real knowledge. It's about doing your best to keep on top of your field by gathering information both inside and outside of your areas of expertise and being at the leading edge as often as possible. But that doesn't mean spending hours every day in the library or poring over professional journals. Assertive curiosity is something much more dynamic than that. It's about bridging the gap between theory and practice. It's about leaving the ivory tower and immersing yourself in a particular field. It's talking to the experts and authorities, and as you become an authority, it's inviting people to talk with you. The Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman was like a modern-day Edison in some respects, although Feynman's work concerned the hidden world of quantum mechanics and cosmology. But there was also a very practical side to Feynman. He once explained the crash of the Challenger to a congressional committee using just a glass of ice water and a tiny piece of rubber. Feynman once said that there is a sure way to tell whether someone is a real expert or just posing as one. It all depends on how often they say three very important words: I don't know. If a person has the answer to every question, if there's seemingly nothing on a particular topic that they don't thoroughly understand, then you know you've got a phony on your hands. But when somebody obviously knows a lot, but is still able to admit that they don't know everything, that's the mark of true authority. Of course, Feynman added an extremely vital corollary to that principle that definitely applies to assertively curious individuals. While they're more than willing to admit they don't know, admitting that includes a very strong intention to find out. Assertively curious people are eager to be challenged, and they'll challenge others in return. They want to get the facts, and they know they haven't got them all yet. What's more, they know they'll never get all the facts, and they're very happy about that. Drawing upon this, our third point concerns the operational, interactive component of assertive curiosity. It's listening, questioning, being responsive, and remembering that every human being is different from every other. It's about eliciting responses and drawing out people who are naturally quiet. It's about finding what's best in people, while also respecting their limits and being professional at all times. There's nothing especially complicated about this. Usually it's just a matter of asking the right questions and really wanting to hear the answers. It can be as easy as saying, "That sounds interesting. How can I help?" Or, "I've been thinking about something new. I'd like your opinion." Nothing is more inspiring to employees than having a manager ask for their feedback. But how often does that actually happen in the corporate world? Assertive curiosity doesn't mean just finding answers to problems. It's really about finding out what people think. When you do that, you'll be surprised at how many problems you can quickly eliminate. You'll be even more surprised by the number of problems that will never come up in the first place. Here's point number 4. Assertive curiosity is about being interactive with people without having a fixed agenda, about being flexible and adjusting to other people's interests, and having the confidence to admit that another point of view might be just as valid as your own. Sometimes it means accomplishing only half of what you wanted from a meeting or a phone call, but still feeling good about what you've learned. It means striking a creative balance between being an eager questioner and a patient teacher. It's about balancing your own curiosity with another person's need to learn. In many areas, Dale Carnegie was hugely ahead of his time, and one of the clearest examples of this is the way he stresses paying attention to other people's wants and needs. That means being curious about what other people want and using those desires as a way to make a connection. The fact is, most people won't tell you what they really want unless you ask them. But how many of us ever bother to ask? The way around this is actually quite paradoxical. If you're really interested in what another person cares about, the best way to access that information is by sharing something about yourself. But as you do so, you need to remember that you're only doing it as a way of inspiring the other party to talk. Don't get so caught up in your own story that there's no room for anyone else to say anything. In order to share a personal story of your own as a way of eliciting information from another party, there are just a few points you need to keep in mind. First, always begin the conversation in a friendly and unthreatening manner. This is especially important if you're in a supervisory role, when people are naturally hesitant to open up to you. Generally, it's best to be very explicit about this. Make it clear that the conversation will be off the record, or ask permission to share a piece of personal information. This is all part of really seeing the situation from the other person's point of view. Then make sure that the information you share is conveyed in a dramatic and interesting way, so that they feel inspired to do the same. For example, it's not very exciting to hear someone say, "Someday I'd like to have my own business." Compare that with, "I've always dreamed of owning an elegant little boutique where I could sell really elegant clothes." The second alternative is more than just a business plan. It's sharing a dream. And when you share one of your dreams, the person you're speaking with may find the courage to share one of theirs, which is what you really want to happen when you're an assertively curious manager. There are an infinite number of questions you can ask people in order to get them talking and sharing information about themselves. As we've seen, sometimes the best start is to reveal something about yourself, but the deeper purpose should be to ignite the other party's curiosity about things that they may have simply taken for granted and accepted. Here, for example, are some sample questions that can serve that purpose. The chances are you've never been asked questions like this by a manager or supervisor in your workplace. Even if someone wanted to ask about these things, perhaps they seem too personal or unbusinesslike. But they can really be very important for creating an atmosphere of assertive curiosity. As you listen to these questions, I think you'll see how valuable they can be for helping people to find out about themselves and adopt an attitude of curiosity toward their lives. In fact, they'll probably help you to do much the same thing. What is the history of your family name? What part of the world is your family from? What is the linguistic derivation of your name? Where do you live? How do you like living there? What are some of the things that you enjoy doing with your family? What do you like and dislike about the kind of work you're doing in the company? How did you get your start with this organization? Do you like to travel? Where's the last place you went for a vacation? What were your impressions of that place? What sports do you enjoy? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do in your free time? What are your ideas on how our company could be changed for the better? If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing today, what would it be? And finally, what would you like to learn about in the next year, in the next week, or even today? When you know the answer to that question, you're exercising your curiosity. But when you take action, you're being assertively curious, and that choice is always yours. The fifth point about assertive curiosity concerns the importance of personal style. We've seen how this works in terms of sharing your hopes and dreams. You've got to put some drama into them. You've got to make them exciting and heartfelt, as if you're sharing an important secret. The importance of this should be very obvious. How can you ignite curiosity in another person if you yourself don't seem very interesting? So often in meetings or presentations, speakers try to portray themselves as if they have all the answers. Even when they ask for questions from the audience, there's usually no sense of spontaneity or drama. Let's be very clear about this. There's nothing less interesting than a know-it-all, even if the person actually does happen to know a great deal. On the other hand, when managers make it clear that they are also seeking to learn, that their sense of curiosity is still alive and well, that's a much more inspiring form of leadership. An assertively curious person is like the leader of an orchestra. There has to be some theatrics involved. If you watch the conductor of a major orchestra, you'll see exactly what this means. It's not just about telling people which notes they ought to be playing at a particular moment. It's helping to actually discover the notes on their own, or at least to feel that they've made those discoveries. When you know how to use curiosity in this way, you'll bring out the best in everyone, including yourself. Humor is the sixth component of assertive curiosity, and it goes along with the sense of style that we've just been discussing. We've said that assertively curious people are very frank about how much they don't know. As a result, they often have a finely developed sense of self-deprecating humor. Humor and curiosity go together because both depend on the pleasure of surprise and the unexpected. Humor isn't just a tactic of an assertively curious person, it's a natural characteristic. But in a practical sense, humor does create the kind of relaxed atmosphere that makes everyone want to listen and learn. Before we leave the topic of humor, we should mention that it's one of the most elusive of all people skills. It's one of the most difficult skills to learn and master, and there's a very simple reason for that. Most people don't really think they have anything to learn about humor. Most people already think they know how to be funny, or at least how to appreciate a funny person or situation. Very few people will admit that they don't have a highly developed sense of humor. Yet how many people do you know who really have the ability to make you laugh? Conversely, do you have the ability to bring laughter to other people? Answering that question honestly can take some courage. But if it causes you to realize that your humorous quality isn't what you thought, there's still hope. And again, the solution lies in just being very honest. There was a gentleman who took some of our Dale Carnegie training, and when he heard this discussion of humor, he really took it to heart. He realized that despite what he might have thought, he actually didn't have a very good sense of humor. He wished he did, of course, but he wanted to face the truth. So at the next meeting of his class, he stood up and somewhat sadly announced the truth. He just said, "I'm not a funny person. I'm just not funny." And of course, everybody laughed. Point number 7. Assertive curiosity means recognizing not only what other people want to learn, but what they need to learn as well. Then it means sparking their curiosity to go ahead and learn it. Accomplishing this can take many forms. It can mean forwarding someone an article from the internet, or leaving a book or a magazine on someone's desk. But it has to be done without an agenda on your part. And once again, this is especially true if you're in a supervisory role. Remember how difficult it was to read the books that were assigned to you in school? There's something about genuine learning that seems to be contradicted by being ordered to learn. When you give someone a book or an article to read, or even an audio program like this to listen to, you should be very explicit about the fact that you have no expectations or agenda that they'll actually do so. Really emphasize that point. Say something like this: "I know how hard it is to read something on the basis of an assignment, and I don't want you to feel any pressure to look at this, but if you ever have a moment, I think you might find it useful. I know I did." And that's all you say. Leave it at that. The key is, however, that you don't just say that the person doesn't have to look at what you've given them. You really have to mean it. You have to completely relinquish your own agenda if you want to create curiosity in the other individual. You have to be very assertive about that, and the assertiveness needs to be directed at yourself. Otherwise, you're just engaging in a not-too-subtle form of manipulation, which has nothing in common with effective people skills. Point number 8. Assertive curiosity has to be supported by the company culture as a whole. This means strong and visionary leadership, of course, but also tangible institutional support, including resources, personnel, and funds. Curiosity needs to be reinforced throughout the organization, from the CEO to the mailroom. It needs to be reflected in what is said and written, but more importantly, by what is done. You may be an assertively curious manager, you may really care about engendering authentic curiosity in your team, but if you're a lone voice in the midst of an essentially conformist environment, your impact is going to be limited. So take a hard look at how your company responds to people who ask unexpected questions and who come up with surprising answers. What systems are in place to support that kind of assertive curiosity and to reward it when it takes place? We tend to think of people skills in terms of what happens between two individuals or within a small group. But sometimes there are things that need to be done on the macro level that will make individual interactions much more effective. The ninth point is really a specific application of point number 8. Curiosity should be mentored by senior management for those lower on the corporate ladder. Through a mentoring relationship, managers can see very clearly how well team members are seeking to expand their vision. With this insight, managers can actually make curiosity a factor in employee evaluation, recognition, and promotion. At the same time, lack of curiosity needs to be addressed through training and development programs. None of this means that there should be an official department of curiosity within the corporate structure, but there should be a way of giving employees time and motivation to explore new ideas and points of view. The classic example of how powerful this can be is the legendary Skunk Works division of the Lockheed Martin Aircraft Corporation. This was an unofficial department of the company whose sole purpose was to explore new ideas and eccentric approaches to problem solving. For more than 50 years, this division produced some of the most innovative concepts in the history of aviation. Yet the whole enterprise was based on nothing more than the importance of curiosity and the power of junior and senior employees working together in an unstructured, no-pressure environment. For example, the whole technology of stealth design for military aircraft emerged from the Skunk Works. Engineers found the mathematical key to the stealth design buried within an obscure physics journal, originally published in Russian. Oddly, the bureaucratic Russian military had never made use of the principle, despite urgings from the article's Russian author. Even more amazing is the way the first stealth plane was tested. The plane was housed in a secret, unlighted hangar filled with bats. When the bats couldn't detect the plane's presence and crashed into it in the darkness, the engineers knew they had a successful design. It's very hard to imagine that the bat testing system could have been thought of in a conventional research and development program. It required an institutional commitment to curiosity in a setting that was outside the official company profile. In fact, for many years, the existence of the Skunk Works was not even acknowledged by Lockheed Martin, nor did the U.S. government acknowledge the planes that came out of it. Finally, the 10th principle of assertive curiosity, and perhaps the most important, assertive curiosity should be fun. The reward should be spontaneous and intrinsic, like when you feel the excitement of wanting to explore a new topic, or when you see that you've kindled that excitement in one of your colleagues or coworkers. Assertively curious managers aren't doing it for the money. Curiosity is simply a part of who they are, and really curious people can't imagine doing anything else. A good way to glimpse the power of curiosity is to consider its opposite, which is boredom. It's the sense that your creative or even your subversive energies are being completely stifled. It's the way you feel when you've got to sit up straight through a long class on something that holds no interest for you. That's not the way to experience education, and it's certainly not the best way to live your life. We began this session with the idea that life is like a book. One of the most appalling comments on our present way of life is that half of all the beds in our hospitals are reserved for patients with nervous and mental troubles. patients who have collapsed under the crushing burden of accumulated yesterdays and fearful tomorrows. Yet a vast majority of those people would be walking the streets today, leading happy, useful lives if they had only heeded the words of Jesus. Have no anxiety about the morrow. Dale Carnegie. Welcome to Session 6, where we'll continue our discussion of the 5 essential people skills. Once again, our focus in this session will be on assertive curiosity. Based on what you learned in Session 5, you should now see that assertive curiosity has many benefits, both as a trait of your own and as a quality you can develop in your team members. We've already spoken about some of the people skills that can help you reach those objectives. Now, at the start of Session 6, we'll sharpen our focus a bit. We'll look at the things you absolutely must do as a manager to maximize assertive curiosity in a corporate setting. Please pay close attention to the 4 things we're going to cover now. These are the essentials, the must-haves, the elements that really make the difference between a culture of complacency and a winning team. Assertive curiosity depends on just a few vital components in the relationship between managers and employees. The most important of these is really very simple. It's frequency of contact. Assertive curiosity means face-to-face meetings with team members on a continuous basis, every day if possible. This kind of concern lets you see who deserves praise at a given moment and who needs help. It shows your commitment, and it encourages your team members to think about what they can do in return. In order to make this personal contact happen, you should schedule time every week for an individual meeting or a group session when team members can just get to know each other. A good time for this to happen is at the start of the workday. Once a week, for example, team members might be willing to come in 20 or 30 minutes early to catch up on what's been happening in their work and in their lives. This works best when everyone participates. Assertive curiosity is enhanced when it's a team effort rather than a solo enterprise. Like all people skills, curiosity should be a collaborative and social experience, not a competitive and isolated one. In order to make these informal meetings successful, it's best to have an agreed-upon topic that's neither too narrow nor too broad. If there's no topic for the meeting, there's a danger that people will just sit there waiting for someone to break the ice. That someone will probably be their senior person in the group, that is, you, the manager, with the result that the whole interaction will become too formal, with everyone following your lead. On the other hand, a topic that's too narrowly defined might prevent people from speaking about what's really on their minds. They might think their concerns are off topic, so they'll just keep quiet. The real purpose of having a topic for group interaction is not to solve that particular problem, but to use the topic as a starting point for a discussion in which assertive curiosity gets put into action. In a group setting like this, assertive curiosity becomes really interactive. Team members develop and share questions, insights, and solutions. It's a good chance to learn how others think and also about how your own thought processes work. Within that framework, here are some specific guidelines for an effective group discussion. These are shared principles and responsibilities that should be defined and agreed to by each team member. First and foremost, everyone should make a commitment to attend and be on time for the meetings. Team members should understand that the purpose here is not to stand out or win an argument. Friendly disagreements are acceptable and even desirable, but personal criticism should be avoided. At the first meeting, decisions can be made about the group's goals, how often meetings will take place, how progress can be evaluated, and how any conflicts can be resolved. It's often a good idea to choose a new person to lead the discussion at each session. Or the group may feel more comfortable if you, as the senior manager, were to take on that role every week. Let's look at an example of how a meeting like this might proceed. We'll assume that the topic for the week is communication within the corporate setting. The leader of the discussion begins by asking if anyone can think of some obstacles that get in the way of people communicating effectively about work-related issues. If nobody responds, the discussion leader should share an experience of his own. This is a basic tool of assertive curiosity, and it usually primes the pump for others to come forward. In any discussion of communication issues, a very common theme is the divergence of communication styles that can exist among individuals. For example, one person might be more comfortable with written communications, while another prefers speaking on the phone or personal meetings. Differences like these can become a problem when a manager prefers one style of communication while a team member is more at home with another. Sharon, for instance, was terrified by the Post-it notes that often appeared on her desk when she was out to lunch. The notes meant that Jill, her supervisor, had appeared in her office and had found her gone. Each note always had the same 2 words scrawled on it: "See me." Jill was simply very uncomfortable with the experience of going to her supervisor's office and having a meeting in that location. Sometimes it seemed to Sharon as if Jill deliberately came to her desk at times when Jill knew that she would be at lunch. Was there some subtle message behind this? Sharon wondered. Was it a way of telling her that she should be eating lunch at her desk? If so, Sharon felt that was very unfair, since her job description stipulated that she could take a 45-minute lunch break every day. But Sharon never brought up any of these concerns to Jill. Instead, she meekly appeared in Jill's office as the Post-it notes directed. In the group discussion, however, it became clear that this was not only a chance for Sharon to assert herself, it was also an opportunity for her to put assertive curiosity into action. She should simply ask Jill how it happened that the Post-it notes always seemed to appear while Sharon was at lunch. Sharon could diplomatically point out that it would be much more efficient for Jill to make her visits during the plentiful hours each day, when Sharon was sure to be at her desk. By hearing this from her peers, Sharon is able to get the support she needs to behave assertively with Jill, her supervisor. This is really at everyone's best interests, including Jill, who will find that Sharon is a much more productive worker when she doesn't feel intimidated. At the end of the weekly meetings, it's a good time for you as a manager to take a team member aside and check up on how things are going. It's a chance for you to ask questions on a one-on-one basis, and also to encourage employees to ask you about whatever is on their minds. Assertive curiosity begins with knowing what you don't know, and then taking action to get that information. You and your team members need frequent updates on individual responsibilities, as well as on what's happening in the company as a whole. Without impinging on the privacy of team members, you should schedule appointments to observe team members actually doing their jobs. The intention here should be toward mentoring, support, and assertive curiosity. It shouldn't be like spying. This is a chance for you to assess and assist team members in whatever way they need help. At the same time, it's an opportunity for employees to make suggestions within the context of their everyday work environment. We've seen how much time do you need? We can refer to this question as time on task, and it should be brought up in every discussion of workplace issues. Learning to use time well is critical for both managers and team members. The fact is, people need help in learning effective time management. Allocating realistic amounts of time means greater productivity. How a company and a manager define time expectations can establish the basis of peak performance for all. Regarding time management, a good rule of thumb is, expect more and you will get more. High expectations are important for everyone, especially in light of one of the corporate world's best established laws. Work expands to fill the time available. Expecting team members to complete a task within a designated time frame can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, especially when you hold similar high expectations for yourself. Without doubt, the single most effective time management tool is for team members to keep a log of how they spend their time each workday. In asking people to do this, you should be sure to put it in the context of assertive curiosity. Instead of presenting the time log as an intrusive scrutiny of what people are doing every second of the day, make it clear that this is just a way of exercising healthy curiosity about how things get done, and the results are likely to be interesting and surprising. John, for example, is the owner of a film editing and post-production facility in Los Angeles. He employs a team of editors who work on Hollywood movies as well as smaller, independently produced projects. Much of the work is done at night, and even for experienced night workers, there's a tendency to become less than efficient at 3 or 4 in the morning. John wanted his team members to create time logs as a way of dramatizing the need for better work habits, but he knew there was danger in simply ordering them to do so. Instead, he came up with a novel way of introducing the topic. He bought some inexpensive stopwatches at a sporting goods store and passed them out to his team. Then he asked if everyone would agree to watch one of the professional football games that were going to be televised that weekend. As a special assignment, he asked his people to keep a time log of how much of the telecast was actual football action and how much was commercials or other breaks in the game. As these football time logs revealed, the action portion of the games comprised less than 7.5 minutes of the 3-hour telecast. Based on this information, it was easy for John to suggest trying something similar by keeping time logs of the editing work. In fact, the editors almost looked at it as a game. They wanted to see how little actually got done over the course of an 8-hour shift. But once the logs were completed, everyone saw that a serious point was being made. The results were not quite as striking as the football time logs, but there was certainly not an optimum use of the available time. Through this assertively curious exercise, team members understood that changes had to be made. And because John had exercised creative people skills, the lesson was conveyed without negative feelings on anyone's part. As a time log will reveal, different people work well in many different ways. Your awareness of this fact should be reflected in the way you discuss the time logs and in the larger expectations you have for one individual or another. Brilliant thinkers in the conference room may be much less effective in face-to-face dealings with clients or customers. Team members rich in hands-on experience may not do so well in presentations or in preparing written reports. People need the opportunity to find out where their talents lie and to use them in the ways that work best. Then as time passes, they can be motivated to move into areas that don't come so naturally. As a manager, you have primary responsibility for being assertively curious about your team and for improving and expanding their skills. But you need and deserve a lot of help. In particular, upper management has the power to shape an environment that is favorable to curiosity and achievement. You as a manager should make this clear to your supervisors. When this exciting, assertively curious environment starts to come into being, managers and executives begin to think of themselves as educators, not just as bosses. What specific qualities must the environment have? Adequate resources are put into creating opportunities for managers and team members to reflect and act on their mutual concerns. Managers receive support and are given time for the development of new ideas and approaches. But the most crucial is a strong sense of purpose. In a word, goals. First for the organization as a whole, and then for each individual team member. The topic of goals is so central that we should spend a few moments thinking about it, to see how goal setting is really an expression of assertive curiosity. For example, it's best to begin with some questions. What do you like to do? What are your interests? What are you truly passionate about? Ask yourself these questions and ask your team members as well. Be sure to make it clear that the answers to these questions don't have to be work-related, at least not initially. Next, however, you'll want to ask how these passionate interests can find applications in the workplace. How can your interests benefit the company's profitability, which will advance your own career in the process? Be aware, however, that you're probably not the only person in the world or even in your company who has these talents. How can you be unique? How can you be better? As you scan the corporate environment, what do you see? Where do you fit? Where do you see opportunity? Those are big questions, and they're the kinds of questions that assertively curious people naturally ask in order to implement their goals. Whenever you think about goals, there are other questions you should ask. They concern the time issues we spoke about a moment ago. How long will it take to realize your goals? How will you measure your progress during that period? Once you've identified your talents, translated them into specific goals, and put them in a time frame, there are still some more questions to ask. So consult with your colleagues and coworkers. What do they think of your goals? This is also a chance for you to ask them about their own aspirations. Whenever you're thinking about goals, whether for yourself as an individual or for your team, understand that achieving your objectives will be difficult. And if they're not difficult, you should ask whether these are indeed worthwhile goals. A real goal should be hard. It should test your will. Your resolve should be challenged. When that happens, will you double your efforts or run for shelter? Ultimately, there is a very deep question you must ask. Are your goals driven by ego or by a higher sense? Is your goal superficial, or will it really benefit your work and your life? Improvement is the key idea here. When the goal is realized, you should be a lot better off than before. This doesn't only mean you'll earn a bigger salary. This is admittedly very important, but there could also be intangibles that will enhance your situation after your goals have been achieved. What are those intangibles? How can you identify them and use them to increase your motivation? How can they get you from where you are now to where you really want and need to be? We've spent a fair amount of time on goals and goal setting. Although this is not unusual in programs on personal development or management training, goals are rarely linked to ideas like assertiveness or curiosity. In fact, the very importance of goal setting has led to its being discussed in very predictable ways. People ask, "What are your goals?" And it seems that whoever can list the most goals wins. But this isn't really the point. Making a list of goals can be fun, but there's not much point in listing all the things you want when you may never get there. What people really need to ask is, what will you do to make sure you reach your goals? That's assertive curiosity. Too many people treat goal setting like leaving on a dream vacation, but without a map of how to reach the destination. It's one thing to dream about where you want to go, but you've got to know whether to go north or south. Maps, of course, are usually on paper, or today they may also be on a computer screen. You should use both those mediums in order to take the all-important step of writing down your goals, not just as informal notes to yourself, but as a carefully organized plan of action. Do this for yourself and encourage your team members to do the same. As you begin to write out a goal, make sure it's something you really want, not just something that sounds good or something you think you ought to want. When setting goals, remember that they must be consistent with your values. If you don't know what your values really are, now's a good time to ask yourself about them in an assertively curious way. Do the same for the members of your team. As you encourage them to write down their goals, encourage them also to think about what they believe in and how they came to have those beliefs. In this way, goal setting can become a powerful people skill. For example, if someone on your team states that she wants to have an income of $150,000 a year, feel free to compliment her on her ambition, but then ask how hard she wants to work in order to achieve that goal. Is she willing to come in on weekends, for example, in order to put together a new presentation or to do some independent research? Perhaps spending that extra time at the office would contradict another of her goals, such as being with her family as much as possible. It's a good idea to ask yourself about your goals in at least 6 different areas of your life: your family, your finances, your physical health, your education, and your spiritual perspective. By gaining clarity in each of these areas, you will become a more complete person, and you'll find that your skills in dealing with other people will be strengthened as well. Always write your goals in the positive instead of the negative. Once again, do this yourself and encourage others to do the same. Think about what you want, not about what you want to leave behind. Part of the reason for writing down your goals is to create a set of instructions for our subconscious mind to carry out. The subconscious is a very efficient but somewhat limited tool. It cannot make the distinction between thought and physical reality, and it does not make judgments between right and wrong. Its only function is to carry out its instructions. The more positive instructions you give it, the more positive results you will get. This is a basic premise of all forms of personal development, including the development of people skills. Make sure you give it the attention it deserves. For the same reason, when you write down a goal, make sure you do so in as much detail as possible. If your goal seems sketchy in your own mind, there must be some assertively curious questions you still need to ask. Instead of writing, "I want to be given more responsibility in my company," write, "I want to become the Director of Human Resources within the next 5 years so that I can increase the diversity of our workforce." Once again, you're giving the subconscious mind a detailed set of instructions to work on. The more information you give it, the more clear the final outcome becomes. The more precise the outcome, the more efficient the subconscious mind can be. In this sense, the mind is just like a company. It needs a good business plan before it can act efficiently. Your list of goals is simply a business for your mind to invest in and work towards. If you can actually see the goal you want to achieve when you close your eyes, your heart and your soul can see it too. Suppose you were asked to write down the largest amount of money you feel you can earn in the next 12 months. When you start to do this, maybe some very large figures pop into your mind, figures that seem very unrealistic. You might think, "I can make $1 million or $2 million, but it's too scary, so you won't write it." What does this tell you? If you're frightened of even writing down the number, consider how much more frightened you must be of actually making this happen. But that reluctance and that difficulty is an indication there is real truth in these seemingly outlandish numbers that entered your mind. Even though they're not based on any material circumstances at the present time, they don't have to be based on physical circumstances. Your thoughts, after all, are the start, and the real start of anything is not based on physical circumstances. When the first airplane flew, was it in the air over Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, or in the minds of the Wright brothers? Here's the real difficulty that people encounter when they're called upon to formulate a specific goal, especially in writing. We may have been told that this is only for ourselves, that no one else will ever see the number, but we don't really believe that. For the vast majority of people, there's an imaginary person looking over their shoulder. That imaginary person sees the number they've written and says, "Are you crazy? You'll never make that much money in 100 lifetimes." So we let the imaginary person make the decision for us, without realizing that this is just as much an expression of our imagination as the $1 million or the $50 million that we were tempted to write down. Since it's a negative expression, you're much more ready to believe it. But why? Don't let this imaginary observer make limiting decisions for you. Be aware that the imaginary observer has no more basis in reality than anything in your wildest dreams. The important thing is what you believe, or even what you want to believe, before you bring in the imaginary spokesman for reality. Let's be very clear about this. If you believe that something is possible, even in your wildest dreams, it is a goal worth striving for. The only qualification is that at some primary level you must believe it is possible. You must be able to take it seriously, even if you don't imagine that anyone else can. And to become a master of people skills, you must be able to engender that power of belief in everyone around you. The ability to move what's in your mind to the minds of others is really a power of communication. In the next session, we'll move from asking the right questions to sharing the best answers. Our focus will shift from assertive curiosity to assertive communication. To get started, please join me for Session 7.